Lesson 14, Indian Stamp Act 1889. In our subject, which is Jurisprudence, Interpretation and General Laws, the Indian Stamp Act is one of the important chapters, not just for exam, but it is going to help you tomorrow when you are going to work. So what do we have in this chapter? Why do we have Indian Stamp Act in detail for our first subject? Let me give you an introduction before we try and understand each of the provisions. First thing you should know is that what is stamp duty? In very simple words, stamp duty is nothing but tax on different kinds of transaction. Like how you are going to pay income tax, just like that, tax has to be paid on different transactions, but we don't call it tax, we call it as stamp duty. Duty which is given to the government. So please remember, stamp duty can be collected by the state government and the central government depending on different kinds of transactions. For example, if you buy a house or if you buy a land, if you buy a plot, you are going to be paying stamp duty to the state government. In every state, the stamp duty is different depending on the transaction. For example, in Karnataka we have the Karnataka Stamp Act 1957. But for the whole of India, we have the Indian Stamp Act, and the Indian Stamp Act is there in your syllabus because we are studying ICSI central government syllabus, and here we are studying basically what is stamp duty, when we should pay stamp duty, when companies should pay stamp duty, and things like that. Please remember that Indian Stamp Act or any law relating to stamps is basically a fiscal legislation. So fiscal legislation should be very strict, and it is not like labor law. See, in labor law what happens is the legislation is very much in favor of the laborers and the employees. But in a fiscal legislation like Income Tax Act or Stamp Act, these are very strict and we have to interpret this very strictly. Now already you know what is the interpretation, we have studied it in this subject. So when we interpret the Stamp Act, we should study it and we should interpret it with strict interpretation. We should just not see what is the spirit of the law, we should see the letter and the spirit of the law, and the interpretation is always strict interpretation. The person who is paying the stamp duty should follow the law in true letter, and letter is more important than the spirit in fiscal legislation. So it is very difficult to escape from stamp duty, and we should make sure that we don't pay more stamp duty nor do we pay less stamp duty. We should pay exact stamp duty as which is required. What do we have in our chapter relating to stamp duty? First, we have the background saying that, as I told you, stamp duty can be levied by state government and central government. So for central government to levy the stamp duty, the powers is given in the union list which is there in the Constitution of India. And then we have the state list where the state governments can levy the stamp duty, and for which items it is there in the list, and each of the authorities cannot go beyond that. State government can levy stamp duty only on the items which is there in the state list. Central government can levy stamp duty only on the items in the union list. So things like that. Why should you know as a student of company secretary the Indian Stamp Act? Because when you are working in a company, company is not paying stamp duty only under Companies Act, but also there are multiple transactions which you should be aware. Please look at yourself as a company secretary means a person who is handling entire corporate law, not just Companies Act 2013. So that is the reason why you should have a very good picture, and you will need the guidance which you have to give to the company relating to the stamp duty provisions. One of the most simple document which requires stamp duty is if there is a physical share certificate, we must pay stamp duty. So usually for allotment of shares, the stamp duty is 0.1% of consideration. So if 1 lakh is worth of the shares, 0.1% means 100 rupees is stamp duty. If we do share transfer, again it is only when we are having physical share certificates we do share transfer. 0.25 usually, it depends on every state, it is different, but according to Indian Stamp Act it is 0.25% of the consideration. So 0.25 means if it is 1 lakh shares I am transferring, 0.25 is 250 rupees is the stamp duty. So please remember very carefully that when we pay stamp duty, we pay stamp duty only when share certificates are in physical form. If we have dematerialized share certificates in electronic form, there is no stamp duty. Stamp duty is totally exempt if the shares are in electronic form. Then in this chapter we have an introduction about what are the different kinds of instruments. Instruments means different kind of documents on which stamp duty is applicable and how it has to be processed. So as a company secretary, you should know these basics, and that is why they have added this in this chapter. Then we study the valuation. That means how do we decide how much is the valuation for paying the stamp duty, and more importantly we study the kinds of stamp duty, the kinds of stamping, what are the different methods, all that I will be explaining. So this is the overview of what we are going to cover in this chapter. One of the most important thing in this chapter is relating to the time of stamping. When should we stamp? Within how many days from the date the document is signed? For example, in foreign any document is signed, but that has to be stamp duty should be paid in India also. But when? It should be within 3 months or 4 months, or what is the rules relating to that we study in this particular act. This is the brief overview of what we are going to study. Now let us go and study this chapter in detail. Indian Stamp Act 1899. So this act is almost more than 120 years old. But still this act is relevant even today. How is that and why is that is what we are going to study. What is the Stamp Act? It is very, very interesting. So the Indian Stamp Act is nothing but it is one act which extends to the whole of India except the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So what we have to understand first is what is the Indian Stamp Act and also what is the scope. So please understand every state has a different Stamp Act, but we are trying to understand Indian Stamp Act and how is it relevant for us. So this act extends to whole of India. That is the first thing we should know. And this is the law relating to stamps. So what is stamp? It is nothing but a levy of a duty. So we will try to understand what that is. So it consolidates all the law relating to stamps in India. So when we say stamp, it is not just the post stamp which you see. So basically we are talking about what is the revenue for the government for different registrations. So even if you register a simple trust, for trust deed we have to pay stamp duty. Of course the stamp duty is different for every state. So we should understand that very clearly. Then the third point we should know in the introduction is that the Stamp Act is a fiscal legislation which is levy of stamp duty on certain instruments. So what we have to understand here is that the first thing is that it is a levy. It is a levy means it is mandatory. It is a revenue for the government. What is it levy? It is levy of certain instruments. When we say instrument, it means different documents. I told you the example of a simple trust deed. So trust deed is an instrument. For trust deed we must pay stamp duty. Or if we have a share certificate, so if the share certificate is physical share certificate, we have to pay stamp duty. So things like that. So what is this law? It is a law which is for levying of duty which we call a stamp duty on certain instruments. So this point we have to know very, very well. So it is the fiscal legislation, that is legislation relating to money and the duty for the collection for government, which is for levy of stamp duty on certain instruments. So this, if you know, everything else we'll understand in this act. So what else should we know? So where do we get points relating to the stamp duty? So in our Constitution of India, so we have what we call as union list, state list and concurrent list. So the first thing we should know is in the union list, entry number 91. So what does this entry number 91 do? It gives power to the union legislature. That means the parliament. So parliament has power to levy stamp duty according to whom? According to entry number 91 of the Indian Stamp Act, entry number 91 of the Constitution of India. So that is what we have to understand. So entry number 91 gives the power. So as you can see, it gives the power to the union legislature to levy stamp duty for certain instruments. So that is mostly of commercial character. For example, bills of exchange. So please remember, in our stamp duty, even the state has a power. So that is why I told in our country, basically the government of India has power under entry number 91 of the union list and also every state government. So we have Tamil Nadu Stamp Act, Karnataka Stamp Act, Andhra Pradesh Stamp Act, Maharashtra Stamp Act. So every state has their own act relating to stamp because of entry number 63 of the Constitution of India. So there is also one more list we call as concurrent list, and there we have entry number 44. So if somebody asks you, can the state and center together levy stamp duty? Yes, and that is concurrent list, that is entry 44. So the government of India can make law to levy stamp duty. The state governments, the different state governments in India can levy stamp duty according to entry number 63 of Constitution of India. Also concurrent list, that is both the center and state together can make laws relating to stamp duty. And the next point we should know in the introduction is that the amendments to the Central Act effected by the states are in shape of amendments to the Central Act, adding new sections, separate schedules, etc., which is there in entry 44. So now we know, first we understood this act is whole of India. This act is for stamp duty and for payment of the stamps. So everything related to that is in this Indian Stamp Act 1899. Then we should try to understand what is the concept relating to the entire thing. So this one sentence, please remember. Indian Stamp Act is a fiscal legislation envisaging levy of stamp duty on certain instruments. Any question you get in the exam, first you write this sentence, half your trouble will be solved in that sentence itself. Then we understood the power. So where is the power to make law relating to the stamp duty? It is in the Union list entry 91, state list entry 63, and also entry 44 in the concurrent list. Once we know this, we should come to what is the object of the act. The purpose of the act is what? Very simple. Government should get revenue. Let us not forget that. So government needs revenue. Governments need money to do the development of the country, to the government or the local government, state government. So the purpose of this act is to raise revenue for the local governments. So that is very, very important. In addition, payment of stamp duty is a legality to the document, and this must be submitted as an authentic document in the court. So it is a evidence. For example, if I tell you, I have a share certificate, okay, very good, but I did not pay stamp duty. It is so funny. I have share certificate. I don't have pay stamp duty. My share certificate only will become invalid. So that is the reason why I am telling you, payment of stamp duty is not only government is going to get revenue. That is the first point. That is something we know. But more importantly, to call a document, we have to call a document as a legal document, as a valid document. It should be appropriately stamped. What should it be? Appropriately stamped. That is what we have to understand as the object of the act. Now we will come to the definitions under this act. In the definitions, first let us try to understand bills of exchange. So in Indian Stamp Act, you should know bills of exchange, because what is bills of exchange and why we have stamp duty on bills of exchange we have to know. So yes, section 2 subsection 2, what does it say? Bill of exchange means a bill of exchange as defined in the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881. It includes a hundi. That way we not understand. So as per Negotiable Instruments Act, what does it say? It is an instrument in writing containing unconditional order. So this is the most important thing we should know. It is nothing but a letter or a document which is in writing, which has an unconditional order signed by the person who is giving. That means the maker. So directing a certain person to pay a certain sum of money only to or to the order of a certain person or to the bearer of the instrument. So the directions will also be given. So if I give you a document, and in the document bill of exchange, so what I will say is I am directing a certain person. So I am directing Mr. Arun. So I am directing Mr. Arun to pay a certain sum only to that particular person or the bearer of the instrument. So that time it becomes a bill of exchange. So this is what we have to understand. So bill of exchange payable on demand is the next concept. So it means bill of exchange, and bill of exchange on demand, which includes order for payment of sum of money by bill of exchange or promissory note or promissory note in satisfaction of any sum of money. So this is what we have to know very, very clearly. So in the payment of any sum of money out of any particular fund which may or may not be available, upon any condition or contingency which may or may not be performed or which may happen, an order for the payment of any sum of money weekly, monthly or the set period, or a letter of credit. So bill of exchange includes all these things. We just have to remember this. So bill of lading 2 subsection 4, it includes a thorough bill lading but does not include a maid's receipt. What is that? We'll try to understand. So in abbreviated form we know it as bill of lading or BL. So 3 copies of bill of lading are made, each signed by the master. So we have to know there are 3 copies. So this is mainly when we are shipping the products through boat or water, ships, cruiser. So that time we will require all of this. So 1 copy is kept by the consignor of the goods, that is the person who is going to sell, 1 the master of the ship, and it is forwarded to the consignee. So today it is not very relevant because most of it we are doing through the Customs Act, but you should know what is this procedure. So even today we should know these concepts very well. So next we come to bill of lading is a written evidence of contract for the carriage and delivery of goods by sea for certain freight. So what is it? It is a evidence. So that is the first thing we have to know. What evidence? For contract for delivery of goods by sea. So when goods are delivered on board of a ship, the receipt is given by the person in charge of that time. So the receipt is known as mate's receipt. So this is very, very important for us to understand. The shipper of the goods returns this receipt to the master of the ship before the ship leaves and receives from him the bill of lading for goods signed by the master. So this is the procedure which we have to understand. So next we come to conveyance. So conveyance, so what does it mean? So the term conveyance includes a conveyance on sale of every instrument by which a property, whether movable or immovable, is transferred inter vivos and which is not otherwise specifically provided for the schedule. It does not include a will. So that is conveyance. So now we will understand what is an instrument. Important definition for exam. So instrument means every document by which any right or liability is purported to be created, transferred, limited, extended, extinguished or recorded. So definition of an instrument is an inclusive definition. So examples is conveyances, leases, mortgages, promissory notes, wills, ordinary letters which are not instrument. So accounts are not instrument. Draft document which is not executed is not instrument. Photocopy of an agreement is not instrument. So these 3 things you should know. What is not a instrument, which you may get in exam. Okay. Next we come to stamp. Extremely important because we are doing Indian Stamp Act. So according to 2 subsection 26 of Indian Stamp Act, so never forget which is the name of the act, 1899. Stamp means any mark, seal, endorsement by any agency or person duly authorized by the state government. So that is what is a stamp. So stamp includes adhesive or impress stamp for the purposes of duty chargeable under this act. So it means a mark or a seal. So the stamp can be like this, or the stamp can be like a rubber stamp, or it could be embossed where the words can be seen. So whatever it could be. So stamp means mark, seal or endorsement by any agency. So when we say agency, it is usually like sub-registrar office. So sub-registrar office is agency of the government, correct? State government. So any agency or person duly authorized by the state government. So it is very important. So Indian Stamp Act knowledge is important for you to understand the respective Stamp Act of whichever state which you are going to work in. So if you know this, it is very easy for you to understand. So it includes adhesive or impressed stamp for the purposes of duty chargeable under this act. So instruments chargeable with duty. Now we are coming to the main concepts which is there for the exam. you should know this very well. So if somebody asks you which are the instruments, so when I say instrument, just remember the word documents. It is easy for you to remember. Documents chargeable with duty. So document means it includes everything which is having any right or liability, is or purported to be created, transferred, limited, extended, extinguished or recorded. So we can say like rent agreement, for that also we pay stamp duty like 100 rupees, 200 rupees, whatever. Then after that we go for like share certificate. So share certificate we have to pay. Or then if we have a sale deed, we are selling our house or land. For all this we have stamp duty. Why? So because instrument includes document by which any right or liability is created, transferred, limited, extended, extinguished or recorded. So many options are there. Created, transferred, limited, extended, extinguished, recorded. So anything is called as instrument and we have to pay stamp duty for the instrument. So any instrument which is as per Schedule 1 of the Indian Stamp Act is chargeable to duty. So this you should know. In Schedule 1 there is a list and that list has 1, 2, 3 like that. There are different items. So any instrument mentioned in Schedule 1 is chargeable to duty as per the Act. So this is something which we have to understand. So we have examples like what? Affidavit, lease, memorandum on articles of the company, bill of exchange, bond, receipt, debenture, share certificate, partnership deed, everything. I gave you so many examples already. This is another thing you should understand. So basically almost any document we have to pay stamp duty. That is what I am trying to understand over here. Yes. So if an instrument is not listed in the schedule, no stamp duty is payable. So no duty if it is not in the schedule. So this is what we have to understand. So instrument means it does not include ordinary letters. So if it's ordinary letter, we don't need it and we don't need stamp duty for it. So that is the first thing we have to know. So every bill of exchange payable otherwise than on demand or promissory note drawn or made out of India or on after the date accepted or paid or presumed or for acceptance of payment or endorsed, transferred or otherwise negotiated in India is chargeable to duty. So that means even if a document which is in foreign country but which comes to India, we have to pay stamp duty according to this particular instruments chargeable with duty. We have to understand that very well. So now let us try to have an example. Court ordering sanctioning amalgamation scheme. Should the stamp duty be paid? Yes, because it is an instrument as per the Schedule 1 of the Indian Stamp Act 1899. An instrument transferring either movable or immovable property. Like you want to sell your house, you want to sell your land, whatever it is. So that is immovable property. Should we? Yes, it is a conveyance. Because it is a conveyance, we have to compulsorily go for paying of stamp duty. Sale of right to catch fish in a lake. Yes, it is a benefit arising out of the land as it is immovable. So we have to pay the stamp duty here also. These are the examples. There's should I pay stamp duty or not? This is the answer. So what are the documents where I don't have to pay? See, if I read over here instrument chargeable with duty, almost everything I must pay stamp duty. But there are some things where stamp duty is not payable. So any instrument executed on behalf of the government. So government is only revenue. So government is exempting itself from the stamp duty. Or sale or disposition of ships or vessels registered under the Merchant Shipping Act. So if it is under Merchant Shipping Act, there is no stamp duty as per the Indian Stamp Act. Any instrument executed by or on behalf in favor of the developer of the unit carrying the SEZ. So Special Economic Zone, SEZ, the stamp duty is exempted. So we don't have to pay. So please remember, any document which is executed by the government, point number 1, then under the Merchant Shipping Act, point number 2, and then any document which is related to, that is a SEZ, which is having a special economic zone status, there is no stamp duty. To attract more businesses, this provision is there. So what is this substance and description? We'll try to understand. So court have to see whether there is substance and description before they decide the nature of the instrument. So if you see the heading, it may be given rent agreement. Just because heading is rent agreement and I have an agreement like this, does it become rent agreement? You only tell me. Common sense, the answer is no. We have to see the substance and description, not only the heading. I will see blindly heading rent agreement. Here inside they written something else, sale of house. So what I will do for rent agreement, I will pay 100 rupees stamp duty. But the sale of house is worth 8 crores house we are selling. So stamp duty only will be lots of things. So even if you say, if it is 5%, almost like 40 lakhs stamp duty. So to escape 40 lakhs, I am paying 100 rupees. So the authority will not see the heading. The authority will see substance and description. So what is that? Courts have invariably upheld the principle of substance and of the description of the transaction over the form in the matter deciding the nature. So form is simply rent agreement. That is not important. What is it really for? That is what the court will see. The substance of the transaction contained in the document may not necessarily embody the description given in the head. So that is what I told you. Heading is not important. So heading is not important. We have to see what is the substance of the document or agreement, not the heading. So it is the substance of the transaction as contained in the instrument and not the form that determines the stamp duty. So please understand this extremely basic concept of stamp duty. The duty is liable on the instrument and not the transaction. So what is the instrument? What is the substance? What is the content is what we have to understand. So this is what determines whether we should pay stamp duty or not, what instrument it is, what is the rate of instrument for that particular stamp duty. Very, very important. Further, if you to determine whether a document comes within the description of document as per Schedule 1. So please remember, Schedule 1 has one list. So we have to look at the entire document to find out whether it falls under the description. We should not just see heading or only first paragraph and decide, okay, this is rent, okay, pay 100 rupees. No. Please don't do that mistake. We have to see the entire document. That is what they are telling in the Indian Stamp Act, and whether under which list it comes under the schedule. So where a single instrument contains several purposes, that is also possible. So that means one document has 1, 2, 3, 4 different purposes. Then we should check what we call as the dominant purpose. So I may be selling my house. So in the agreement, I have first point, sale of house. Then second point, there is a garden in front of the sale of the garden. Then third point, I have some motor which I am selling, which is attached to the house. Then fourth, something else. So there are 4 points. 4 may be different, but essentially the dominant purpose. What is the dominant purpose? You only tell me what is the dominant purpose. Dominant purpose is sale of house. House is the dominant purpose. So I must pay duty. Though this thing has 4 different points, I must pay stamp duty for the dominant purpose, my friend, and that is the test. So wonderful concept. It is so beautiful. They're telling about dominant purpose when we have 3 to 4 purposes in the instrument. So to determine whether a document is stamped properly or not, court must look at the documents itself as it stands. Suppose for house I have to pay totally 10 lakhs stamp duty. I am paying only 8 lakhs, then I am escaping. So 2 lakhs is what we call as the stamp duty which is underpaid. That means we are having a situation where the document is not sufficiently stamped. So that time the entire agreement should be read by the judge and then decide what is dominant nature, what is the instrument, is it there in the list, what is the percentage, 5%, 8%, what is the stamp duty, how much is paid, and then take a decision whether the document is sufficiently stamped or not. So that is the job of the judge in the court. That is what we have to understand.